I just want to give him the praise. I want to give him all of the esteem that's due his great name, and all the esteem due to the great name of our risen Savior, our Mashiach Yahusha. I also thank you for showing up today. You could go and listen to anyone. There's several great teachers out there. Our brothers and sisters, they're doing the work. But I thank you for coming and listening to little old me. And hopefully the Most High will speak to you today. Appreciate every one of you, and I appreciate my own near and dear family for allowing me the time to study and to pray fast this week so that I could continue to hear from the Most High and draw closer to him. Whether he gives me a message to speak or not, I'll come here and be a fool in front of all of y'all. I just want to get close to him. If you want to just get close to him, somebody just put me a 7 in the chat. And you're not worried about what people think, what people say. Just put a 7 in the chat if you just want to get near and dear to Almighty YAH and that fella that's on his right hand, Yahushua HaMashiach. Well, let's go to, I think it's Acts 13:22. 13:22. There's a fella in the scripts. His name is David. He was sent by the Most High to be an example for us. And this is what they wrote about him, even in the Brit Hadashah, which is the New Testament. It says, and when he had removed him, he raised up unto them David. So when the Most High YAH removed King Saul, he raised up unto them David to be their king, to whom also he gave testimony and said, I have found David, the son of Jesse, a man after my own heart, which shall fulfill all my will. So what the Most High said of David was that David was a man after his own heart. David always looked to see what he could do to please the Most High and just to get near and dear to him, just to be in his presence every chance he got. I tell you that David, he was a special fella, and I know we always harping on his thing with Bathsheba and all of that, and Uriah the Hittite. He counted some folks one time. He numbered them one time, but man, he had a pile on the other side of the scale. He had a pile. That David, I think he wrote like the first 72 Psalms and the other ones. David was a praise warrior. He was a fella that just knew how to touch and reach the Most High's heart. And I'm studying him. I'm picking up the book and I'm looking at David. I'm trying to figure out, how did he get Almighty YAH to say that David is a man after my own heart? Because I want Most High YAH to say that about me. Anybody want Most High YAH to say that about you? Throw me 100 in the chat. Throw me a 100 in the chat if you want him to say that you are a man or a woman after his own heart, pursuing him with all your heart, mind, soul, and strength. You're not going to take a break, take a day off until you can reach out, touch the hem of his garment, whether you need a healing or not. You just need to touch him and be near to him. All praises. Let's hit some scripts real quick. In 1 Chronicles 17, David got this thought. He said to Nathan the prophet, I dwell in a house of cedars, but the ark of the covenant of Yahuwah remains under curtains. And David basically said, look, I want to build a house. I want to build a temple for the Most High. I don't want to see the Ark of the Covenant where the presence of Almighty YAH comes down. I don't want to see that ark in a temporary structure, but I want to see that in a building. I want to see a nice house for the Most High YAH. But Most High YAH told him he couldn't do that. He had too much blood on his hands and from the wars and different things he did. And it just wasn't appointed for him to do that. It was appointed for his son Solomon to do that. But in 1 Chronicles 23, verse 1, when David was old, he pulled his son Solomon to the side. And in 1 Chronicles 23 and 2, he gathered all the princes of Israel and all the priests and the Levites. And in verse 6, it says David divided them into courses among the sons of Levi, namely Gershon, the Kohath, and Merari. How that word courses for me? Courses. Anybody know what we talking about? Put me a Y for a yes and for no in the chat. But those courses, you could find that when you look in Luke chapter 1, verse 5, where it talks about Zechariah and Elizabeth, the parents of Yehochanan the Immerser or John the Baptist, Zechariah was in the temple in the course of Abia. I believe it's like First Chronicles 24:10. He was in the course of Abia. So even long after David had passed on, they were still following David's protocol that David set for those folks to give adoration and service to the Most High YAH. And we see that in Luke 1:5 with Zechariah, the father of John the Baptist. In First Chronicles chapter 15, verse 16, it said that David spoke to the chief of the Levites to appoint their brethren to be singers with instruments of music, psalteries and harps and cymbals, and sounding by lifting up the voice with joy. So David was, hey, I want to appoint some of y'all Levites to be singers. I want y'all to be praise worshipers to the Most High YAH. And so in verse 17, it said, so the Levites appointed He-Man. Anybody remember He-Man? That blonde haired, blue eyed guy with all the muscles. But He-Man was a Hebrew, and he was a Levite, the son of Joel, and his brethren, Asaph, son of Berechiah, and of the sons of Merari, their brethren, Ethan and the son of Hushiah. He-Man and Asaph, they was singers. Can you picture that? He-Man, somebody named He-Man, be walking around, I'm He-Man. But he was like the dude that sung bass, a deep bass in the band or something in the choir. But it was David in verse 16 that spoke to the chief of the Levites and say, look, why don't y'all get some singers together, man? You got enough of y'all, why don't y'all start a choir? Because we need a choir. We need to be praising the Most High when all these sacrifices and offerings and stuff going on. Why don't y'all get? And so they're like, man, you know what, David, that's a great idea. David had a heart after the Most High, is the picture I'm trying to paint. He wasn't just sitting down, just waiting on somebody to spoon feed him and tell him, man, you need to, back when I was in the Catholic Church, you got to stand up at this part, sit down on this part, kneel on this part, genuflect when you do that. Before you get in the pew, put a little water on your head. He wasn't following the cookie cutter existence of somebody who was a believer. David was an innovator. He was a pioneer. He was always thinking. He always had a mind. What can I do to lift up the name of the Most High YAH? What can I do? And he was coming up with all of those things. So he came up with this, man, we need a temple. Prophet Nathan said, no, you probably got too much blood on your hand. Yah says no. And then they said, look, why don't we get some singers together? And they're going to sing while they're doing the offerings. Let's let them sing. And they said, okay. So they got He-Man and Asaph together, and they started singing. David didn't stop right there even. That David, I'm telling you, I am so impressed with David. I'm telling you, I come to tears sometimes just studying him and just reading about him. But in Second Chronicles chapter 7, verse 6, it said the priests waited on their offices. The Levites also with instruments of music of Yahuwah, which David the king had made to praise Yahuwah, because his mercy endured forever. When David praised by their ministry, and the priests sounded trumpets before them, and all Israel stood. It was a time when David not only say, let's build a temple or let's get some singers together. Man, I'm making me some instruments. That dude, he was taking stuff and I'm gonna make me something. This is gonna be a drum. I'm gonna do something with this. We're gonna beat on this, and this will go good when y'all singing this part. And David was innovating. He had a mindset that he was going to praise the Most High, and he was doing that thing with all of his heart, mind, soul, and strength. And in Second Chronicles chapter 8, verse 14, when David had passed away, his son Solomon appointed, according to the order of David his father, the courses of the priests to their service, and the Levites to their charge, to praise and minister before the priest as the duty of every day required. The porters also by their courses at every gate. For so David, the man of Elohim, commanded. David, when he was king, he wasn't making no command about, look, y'all gonna build me a Lamborghini and the rims better spin backwards. And I need that fancy suit, that tailor-made suit. He wasn't saying none of that. He was trying to figure out what he could do to uplift the name of the Most High. And even after he was gone, David's orders was being followed by his son Solomon. And the priests were in their courses. He-Man and Asaph and them, they was singing in the choir. They was playing on the instruments that David himself made and showed them how to make. David, the man of Elohim, he was definitely a man or the man of Elohim during his day. Now, as time would have it, David became king and all of that. But prior to David, there was a fella in 1 Samuel chapter 9 whose name was Kish. And he was a Benjamite, a mighty man of power. You know, that dude, he was working with something. And he had a son whose name was Saul. So Kish, that mighty man of power, he had a son named Saul. So I imagine Saul had to live up to daddy's standards and all. Everybody, man, your daddy, he was something else in his day, man. That dude, I remember the time he picked up that tree with one hand. That tree was about yay big. He picked that up like a football and just pull that out of the ground. And man, he whip up on them guys like that. But Saul grew up and wasn't just a little run himself, but it said Kish had this son whose name was Saul, a choice young man and goodly, and there was not among the children of Israel a goodlier person than he. From his shoulders upward, he was higher than any of the people. That's all. He was a tall fella. He was like the tallest guy around. And it was like, man, don't mess with Saul. You know, we don't want to mess with Saul because he bigger than his daddy. You see how big he is? Everybody figured he was a warrior. But Saul became king. And in 1 Samuel chapter 15, verse 22 and 23, he failed to follow the instruction of Almighty YAH. And Samuel went and approached him and told him it was better to obey than to sacrifice in 1 Samuel 15:22. The result of King Saul not obeying was what was said in 1 Samuel chapter 15, verse 23. And Samuel told this to Saul. He said, for rebellion is as the sin of witchcraft. He said, man, you being rebellious is as the sin of witchcraft, and stubbornness is as iniquity and idolatry, because you have rejected the word of Yahuwah. He had also rejected you from being king. So Saul was picked because he was head and shoulders, not the shampoo, but he was the tallest guy around. All the kings back then, they wasn't like our presidents, them old guys today, where they say, y'all go fight, I'm gonna stay here and get reports. Back then, the kings would go to battle themselves. They would never just sit around expecting somebody else to fight in the battle. They was some good kings because they wasn't gonna put nobody out there if they wasn't about to put themselves out there. Also, King Saul, Samuel said to him, rebellion is as the sin of witchcraft, and stubbornness is as iniquity and idolatry, because you have rejected the word of Yahuwah. He had also rejected you from being king. So that was it. King Saul's kingship was over. And just like Adam and Eve, they didn't realize that they was dying slowly every day. King Saul, as a king, was fading every day. He was going away every day. He was going down, and he was looking less and less like a king. But in chapter 16, poor Samuel, the prophet, was crying. He was weeping for Saul. It tells us all night he cried for Saul. He was like, man, Saul don't realize what he did. He don't realize what he did. And Yahuwah said unto Samuel, the prophet, how long will you mourn for Saul, seeing I have rejected him from being over Israel? Fill your horn with oil and go. I will send you to Jesse the Bethlehemite, for I have provided me a king among his sons. Most High said, Samuel, go ahead, man. Stop crying for Saul. It's over. I ain't taking it back. But go to Jesse the Bethlehemite and take your oil with you, because I have provided me a what? Somebody put what it is he provided in chat. Somebody put that in the chat. What he provided? That's right. He provided himself a king. Man, Saul ain't my king no more. He not the dude I'm rolling with. I'm going to put somebody else in there. So he said, I have provided me a king among Jesse's sons. Samuel went over there and he was like, man, yeah, I got somebody he figured out is righteous. And anybody know who that was? Somebody put the guy's name in the chat. All right. All right. In 1 Samuel 16:10, Jesse called all his boys, and he said, Jesse made 7 of his sons to pass before Samuel. And Samuel said to Jesse, Yahuwah had not chosen these. Jesse, he was like, man, here's all my boys and all and everything. And some of them was like Saul. They was big and strong and everything and muscular. But Sam said to Jesse, Yahuwah ain't rolling with these. That's all the boys you got. And in verse 11, Samuel said to Jesse, or here all your children? It's something got to be wrong, because if these are your boys, then somebody missing. And so Samuel said unto Jesse, or here all your children? And he said, there remain yet the youngest, and behold, he keepeth the sheep. And Samuel said unto Jesse, send and fetch him, for we will not sit down till he come hither. All the boys was around about, I don't know what they was doing, but Dawid was the only one out there working. He was keeping the sheep, and he wasn't there when the call came to come, because the prophet Samuel was there wanting to anoint somebody to be the next king. David was the only one working. Sometimes you gotta realize that in this kingdom, you got to do something, and that you can't just be sitting around like that. The Most High is not calling those that look good and look pretty and handsome and tall and all of this stuff. He's calling somebody that's out there doing the work, regardless if they're short, tall, big, small, pretty, ugly. He's trying to work with somebody that's out there doing the work. And David was out there working with the sheep, while the rest of them guys were staying around when Jesse called. But David, that little shepherd boy, went out there. In verse 12, it says, and he sent and brought him in. Now he was ruddy and withal of a beautiful countenance and goodly to look to. And Yahuwah said, arise, anoint him, for this is he. Samuel, this is the one. Now we can deal with that word ruddy and all of that, but you can go ahead and look that up. You can just Google that. Just Google ruddy horse, ruddy cow, ruddy duck, and you're going to see exactly what color ruddy is for that little shepherd boy, unless Google and trip stuff up. Just put in ruddy horse or something like that. You're going to see exactly what shade of melanin Dawid was. But they brought David in, and Yahuwah said, that's him, Samuel, that's him. And verse 13, Samuel took the horn of oil and anointed him in the midst of his brother, and the Ruach of Yahuwah came upon Dawid from that day forward. So Samuel rose up and went to Ramah. When Samuel anointed Dawid with that oil, it says the Ruach of Yahuwah, the spirit of Yahuwah, came upon David from that day forward. That little shepherd boy was anointed by the prophet Samuel. He had humble beginnings, but once he got anointed, because he was the only one out there seemed to be doing work that day, once he got anointed, from that day forward, the spirit of Yahuwah was with him. Now, it must have been like a big letdown for David's brothers, because it says in that same verse, Samuel took the horn of oil and anointed David in the midst of his brethren. Now, the muscular one and the guys have been lifting weights and they was looking good and all that, man. I'm more tall than David. Why he ain't pick me? Mama say I'm more handsome than David. Why he didn't choose me? What's wrong with Samuel? Samuel must have been on something that day, man. But his brothers, I believe, they probably felt some kind of way watching David, the youngest of all, get anointed. And he was going to be anointed to be what? Somebody put that in the chat. That's right. It was something about being a king. Now, what about the king that existed already? That fellow by the name of Saul. In 1 Samuel chapter 16, verse 14, it tells us about him in the next verse. It says, but the spirit of Yahuwah departed from Saul, and an evil spirit from Yahuwah troubled him. And Saul's servant said unto him, Behold, now an evil spirit from Elohim troubled you. Now the Ruach HaKodesh left King Saul, and there was an evil spirit that came and took that place of the Ruach HaKodesh and was working with Saul now. And even Saul's servants in verse 15 began to notice something ain't right with Saul. Different man. What's up with that dude? Why he say that like that? That's not like him. And it says Saul's servant said unto him, behold, now an evil spirit from Elohim trouble you. Saul, you got something that ain't straight working with you. And they realized he was different in some way. And what they probably realized was that Saul was not keeping Torah. Saul was no longer trying to please the Most High YAH. Sometimes we got to be determined to keep Torah regardless of our circumstances, regardless of our situation. We got to be determined to continue with Almighty YAH, because you don't want to have a change of behavior like King Saul. Today's message is titled Change of Behavior. If you heard what I'm talking about, put a COB in the chat to let me know you know the title is Change of Behavior. Somebody throw me a COB in the chat. Change of behavior. So as a solution to help King Saul, because he was all right back in the day, I don't know what's wrong with him now. It's like the evil spirit working with him now. But in verse 16, it says to Saul to seek out a man who is a cunning player on the harp. And it shall come to pass when the evil spirit from Elohim is upon you that he shall play with his hand and you shall be well. Check this out. King Saul's servant gave him a solution. As man, you need some music. You need some music. They suggested somebody to play music. And it just dawned on me, music have a power over spirits. If you realize that music can influence somebody in a spiritual sense, somebody put me a Y in the chat. Music will influence you. Be careful what you listen to, because the music you listening to can take a hold of you and influence you in a way that the book is not wanting you to go. So be careful what you put into your system. Faith come by hearing, Romans 10:17, and hearing by the word of Elohim. But if hearing is by the word of them rappers that's telling you all kind of filthy things about the daughters of Jacob and telling you all kind of things like you got to go hurt your own brothers, then that's a problem. That you got to love yourself more than that, that you're going to stop yourself from listening to foolishness and get where you can hear this word. That Romans 10:17, that's something else. Check out what happened. Y'all know they was working with David, and David was tending the sheep. He was that little shepherd boy and everything. And the Most High said to Samuel in verse 16, what he said? He said to seek out what? A little shepherd boy. Let's seek out a what? It say man? Highlight that word man. Wait a minute. You mean to tell me they was looking for a man and they pick a little shepherd boy? You mean to tell me they decided to pick a little shepherd boy instead of a man? Let's look at verse 17. And Saul said unto his servants, provide me now, highlight a man that can play well, and bring him to me. And so Saul agreed with their solution, and they decided to look for a little shepherd boy, a man. Man. Shepherd man, boy, man. And verse 18, then answered one of the servants and said, behold, I have seen a son of Jesse, the Bethlehemite, that is cunning in playing, and a mighty valiant shepherd boy. Little boy who gonna pick up some rocks, and a little kid just walking around chewing bubblegum and skipping rope and all of that stuff. And have y'all ever heard that David was a little boy when he was fighting Goliath? Anybody ever heard that? Put me Y in the chat, or N. Y for yes, N for no. You ever heard David was a little boy? The book is destroying all fake fantasies about scripture. It said about David, they was looking for a man to play, and all of a sudden one of the servants said to King Saul, behold, I have seen a son of Jesse the Bethlehemite that is cunning in playing, and a mighty valiant man, and a man of war, a man, and prudent in matters, and a comely person, and Yahuwah is with him. Was David a boy or a man? Put me a B or M in the chat. B for boy, M for man. Because them servants sure thought he was a man. I know Pastor and them say the story was beautiful, how David, that little boy, man, he was out there playing with his trucks and everything. And he just come out of the field with the sheep and all. He just took down a big old man, a big old giant man. But the book say David was a man. Let me tell you what the servants saw about David. They said that David was a son of Jesse. They said that David was cunning in playing. He could play instrument well. They said that David was a mighty valiant man, and he was a man of war, and that he was prudent or wise in matters, and he was a comely person, meaning he was good looking, and Yahuwah is with him. That's the best trait of all. The best trait of all was Yahuwah is with him. Yahuwah is with him. The servants was checking out David. Sometimes we don't realize, but people be checking us out sometimes too. Whether you realize it or not, they are evaluating us every single day. Somebody have their eyes on us and they looking to see what exactly you working with. And when they look at you, I want them to look at you like I want them to look at me and see that dude rolling with the book. I know he act like a fool sometimes, but that dude, he always talking about that book. If you 100 like that, where you want them to know that you serving the Most High YAH, somebody throw me 100 in that chat. Somebody put me 100 in the chat. If you want people to know that you are with the Most High YAH, you are not ashamed before men. Now, in Romans 4:17, this what was said about Abraham. As it is written, I have made thee a father of nations. He made Abraham a father of nations. It said, before him whom he believed, even Elohim, who quickeneth the dead and calleth those things which be not as though they were. Abraham was called a father of nations before he had any child, before he had Isaac or Ishmael. Almighty YAH said, you're going to be a father of a multitude, a father of nations. And Abraham, he was like, me? I ain't had no children. The only one I got is Eliezer. He's my servant that I treat like a son. But Almighty YAH called those things which be not as though they were. Almighty YAH calls those things which be not as though they were, as though they actually exist, because he could see us the way we really are, not when we down in the dumps, in the mud and the muck and the mire, but he sees us at the best that we can be. In Exodus 12:17, look what he said about the nation of Israel. Exodus 12:17, he told them, observe the feast of unleavened bread, for in the selfsame day I have brought your armies out of the land of Egypt. Therefore shall ye observe this day in your generations by an ordinance forever. He said, I have brought your armies out of the land of Egypt. That was just one problem with that your armies thing. It was that them Israelites were slaves at the time. They was Egyptian slaves. And before they ever fought a battle, Almighty YAH was calling them as though they were. He was calling things as though they were. And he was saying, y'all don't realize it yet, but I'm speaking it into existence because I could do that. I did that in Genesis chapter 1. I spoke it all into existence. But he said, your armies, and you know what? Joshua in them, he was beating people right and left. They was beating giants and everything by the end of the day. Just imagine. I shouldn't go there, but just imagine what Almighty YAH is saying about you. The things you think that you just you. But the thing he is saying about you, you think your present circumstance is the thing that you're about. But what is Almighty YAH saying about you? What is he speaking into existence that we can't even hear? He called them slaves, an army. He said, Abraham, you are father of a multitude before Abraham even had a child. And what is Yah saying about us? What is he calling us today about things that we haven't even accomplished? Let's go back. 1 Samuel 16:18. So David's a mighty valiant man and a man of war. He was prudent in all matters, comely person. He was good looking. And most of all, Almighty YAH was with him. Almighty YAH was with him. If I can't be like David in that I'm not the son of Jesse, I played a little music back in my day, but maybe if I can't play like David, that's all right. If I can't be a mighty valiant man and a man of war, I'm okay with that. Prudent in matters. I think if I'm keeping Torah, I'm gonna be prudent in my decision making. But if I can't be a comely person, meaning I can't be like this handsome dude, but I would love to have that last attribute. That last attribute is that Yah is with me. You could keep the rest. Give me that part that say Yah is with you. Saul's servants saw David and they were checking him out. And that's all the things they were seeing. And guess what? They called David a mighty valiant man and a man of war. But there was just one problem. David ain't never fought in no battles in his life. He had never got a sword and went out there and fought with the army. But they were saying, Most High YAH showing us this is a mighty valiant man and a man of war. I love how they were checking out David and they were saying he is a mighty valiant man. They were saying he is a man of war. He's prudent and he's a handsome guy and everything. They wasn't trying to cut down David. I tell you, the further away we go from the book, the worse we start to talk about each other. But see, like today, this day and this time we live in, it's easier to cut each other down. It's easier to say, man, that Netanyahu ain't working with nothing, man. Who you think he is and all that? Look at his nose big. Look at it, man. He got a fake beard, man. That ain't real, man. That beard fake and everything. Got to find something negative to say about anybody in their life. But I would love and I live for the day and I hope for the day when we could actually live that thing in Matthew 22, verse 36 through 40, whereas it talks about to love Yah and to love our neighbor as ourselves. But that's how it was back then. When we become that nation again, that nation called Israel, we're going to have some good stuff to say about each other. We're not going to cut each other down no more. Man, I'm getting happy just thinking about that. Look, I'm enjoying myself just saying that. Just saying that. If you're good about hearing that, somebody put me a 7 in the chat. All right, 7s. All right, let's go to 1 Samuel 16:21. 1 Samuel 16:21. So David came. He came with his harp and all his amplifiers and everything, and he had the big speakers with him and everything. And it said, and David came to Saul and stood before him, and he loved him greatly. And he became his armor bearer. David was playing his favorite kind of music, and Saul loved David greatly, not just the regular love, but the great kind of love. And Saul sent to Jesse saying, let David, I pray thee, stand before me, for he had found favor in my sight. David found favor with King Saul. King Saul, I don't recall saying he loved his own son, Jonathan, or anybody else, but he said he loved David. There was something about David that he loved, that King Saul loved. And David found favor in King Saul's sight. In verse 23, it says, and it came to pass when the evil spirit from Elohim was upon Saul, that David took an harp and played with his hand. So Saul was refreshed and was well, and the evil spirit departed from him. So when David played that music, it influenced that evil spirit, and that evil spirit decided to leave. He wasn't playing no rap music about taking your brother out, or the women of Israel is this and that and the other thing. He wasn't doing all of that. He wasn't singing those songs by dudes who dress up like devils and stuff like that, and they put blood in their tennis shoes and stuff like that. He wasn't doing none of that. He was doing praise and worship. He was doing exaltation to the Most High YAH. He went back to his days when he was praising in the pasture by himself with them sheep, from the time he was a little boy to the time he became a man. And he was out there. And David wasn't just playing and singing everybody else's song. You know what he was doing? David was making up his own thing, because he was that innovator. He was that pioneer. He was the guy that told him, get y'all some singers together. He was that guy that said, let's build a temple for the Most High. He was that guy that said, get He-Man and Asaph and them that sing for you. And look, I made some instruments. We're going to get them instruments and we're going to play this thing like this. We're going to play this thing like that, and make a joyful noise unto Yahuwah. David's gift and his calling was to shut down evil spirits with his gift of music. And the people could see Yahuwah's call on David and that gift that he had with song and with music. All praises. Now, one problem, 1 Samuel 17, verse 4. Them Philistines came a calling, and there went out a champion out of the camp of the Philistines named Goliath of Gath, whose height was 6 cubits and a span. 6 cubits in a span. A cubit is like 18 inches. And what's a span? I forget what a span is. Where the mathematicians at? Y'all, look, Goliath was tall. That dude was big and he was tall. All right, we just roll with that. He was a big, tall dude. And in verse 5, he had a helmet of brass upon his head, armed with a coat of mail, and the weight of the coat was 5,000 shekels of brass. Now, he had all that gear on. That tell me right there, I can take him. He is not undefeatable. He is not somebody that can't be beaten, because if he couldn't be beaten, as big as he looked, he wouldn't have been wearing all that armor. So it was evidently some weakness about him. But that's just me thinking out loud. But every day, according to verse 8, every day he stood and cried unto the armies of Israel and said unto them, why are you come out to set your battle in array? Am not I a Philistine, and you servants to Saul? He didn't even say King Saul. Choose you a man. We about to find out who was a man. Choose you a man for you, and let him come down to me. If he be able to fight with me and to kill me, then will we be your servant. But if I prevail against him and kill him, then shall you be our servant and serve us. So Goliath, look, I got my lawyers here. We at the table. This is the deal. This is the contract. Y'all bring a man. I'm gonna come myself. And if your man beat me and kill me, then we're gonna serve y'all. Philistine gonna serve y'all, whoever left. And if I kill your man, then y'all gotta serve us. And if anybody want to sign a contract, anybody want to sign this paper, and nobody was doing that. And in verse 10, it says, and the Philistines said, I defy the armies of Israel this day. Give me a man, that we may fight together. Give me a man. Give me a man. Sign this paper, sign this contract, so we can get this battle on. If I beat him, y'all serve us. If he beat me, we serve y'all. That's the contract. Do we have a man here with a pen that's willing to sign this contract? In verse 11, it said, when Saul and all Israel heard those words of the Philistine, they were dismayed and greatly afraid. Now, King Saul, if y'all recall, he was head and shoulders above everybody, not the shampoo, but he was just tall like that. He was head and shoulders over everybody. He was the tallest dude around. And their tallest dude, Goliath, he was, come on, somebody come fight with me. And Goliath's their tallest dude. And Saul, you our tallest dude. What you gonna do? But it said when Saul and all Israel heard those words of the Philistine, they were dismayed and greatly afraid. Look, if your leader is scared, if the biggest guy amongst you is scared, what everybody else supposed to do? When the biggest guy you got is terrified. It says in verse 15, but David went and returned from Saul to feed his father's sheep at Bethlehem. And so that's what he was doing at the time when the war sprung up. It just so happened that about that time, Jesse tell David, go ahead to your brothers because in verse 13 it tells us that 3 of his brothers was all in Saul's army, and it said, go ahead, take him some home cooking. And so David went, in verse 16, the Philistine drew near morning and evening and presented himself 40 days. Day after day, Goliath appeared, and all of them Israelites was right there with King Saul hiding from Goliath. Goliath came out and made that challenge to all Israel and King Saul. And all of them just took out their camera phones, and they was like, man, somebody run out there. I want to catch this. I'm going to put this on TikTok, Instant Chat, book, and all of that other stuff. I'm going to put this out there, man. I hope somebody run out there, because I ain't going to run. My job is to film this. My job is to make sure this moment get captured for everybody to see. And old boy over there, yeah, me too. I'm gonna catch it from this angle, and that one's, yeah, I'm gonna catch it from. Who gonna go out there? And everybody, man, I don't know like that. So nobody want to go fight. Nobody want to jump out like them folks at the Alabama boat dock. Nobody wanted to go out there and meet up with Goliath like that. But verse 17, so David was told by Jesse, he said, take for your brother an ephah of this parched corn and these 10 loaves. Jesse didn't send no meat, but he just sent parched corn and some bread. But I guess they was happy with that. And so in verse 20 said, David rose up early in the morning and left the sheep with a keeper and took and went as Jesse had commanded him. David showed responsibility. It showed why he was wise and prudent. He wasn't just gonna leave his sheep and be like, man, I'm going down there. I play for Saul anyway. I don't know. He gotta find somebody else watching sheep. But he got up early in the morning and he probably made sure them sheep was fed. He probably made sure everything was taken care of, and left the sheep with a keeper. It said David showed responsibility and care for those sheep. He wanted to make sure that whoever he left with him knew exactly, look, they like to eat at 6 a.m., at noon, and then at 3. And that one over there, he don't let him get in them bushes. He got allergies. We're gonna have to give him some Benadryl. And that one over there, you gotta watch out for him, because he gonna make a mess behind your back. And he was responsible. He told the keeper how to fight off the predators and stuff like that. But it showed that David was a responsible person to take care of Almighty YAH's most valuable sheep, his people, the nation of Israel. When David went to bring his brothers that bread and that corn, in verse 23, it says that he heard Goliath with that challenge. And David asked, who is this man? Ain't nobody gonna shut him up. And they're like, man, no, I'm just here to film. In verse 26, David spoke to the men that stood by him, say, what shall be done to the man that killed this Philistine and take away the reproach from Israel? For who is this uncircumcised Philistine that he should defy the armies of the living Elohim? David said, he's talking against the armies of the living Elohim. Remember that time back in Egypt when they was just slaves, back in Exodus, where Most High YAH called them an army? And David's, man, we armies of the Most High YAH. We armies of the living Elohim. We ain't gonna let this dude talk. And David asked, anybody got a reward for this dude? And David's brother in verse 28, Eliab, the eldest brother, heard David talking to the men. And Eliab's anger was kindled against David. And he said, why camest thou down hither? And with whom has you left those few sheep in the wilderness? I know your pride and the naughtiness of your heart, for you art come down that you might see the battle. So Eliab, his oldest brother, started fussing with David and, putting David down in front of everybody, trying to embarrass him and everything. And David was just over there trying to bring him some corn and bread and do a good thing and obey his dad. And in verse 29, David said, what have I now done? Is there not a cause? The way David responded to Eliab, that let me know that David, brothers, was always putting him down. He said, man, what have I now done? You always put me down, Eliab. I'm over here just trying to bring you something to eat from daddy. And now you put me down. I can't talk to these guys and find out what's going on. He said, anyway, is there not a cause? Is there not a cause? Somebody put me a Y in the chat or in. Is there not a cause for Israel? Is there not a cause? David was talking bad and bold, and so they went to King Saul, and somebody told King Saul, David, that musician, sound like he want to go out there and fight Goliath. So they brought David to King Saul. In verse 32, David said to Saul, let no man's heart fail because of him. Your servant will go and fight with this Philistine. So King Saul, don't worry about him. I'm going to go fight him. Nobody won't fight him. I'll fight him. And Saul said to David, you are not able to go against this Philistine to fight with him, for you are but a youth, and he a man of war from his youth. So David obviously was a young man, and they didn't think he was able to go to war, and because they had never seen him in a battle before. Although that servant said that he was a valiant, mighty man and a man of war, but David had never been in a war before, so he didn't know what it was about. But King Saul's like, I can't let you go out there like that. He been fighting since he come out the womb, man. Mama said, come on, Goliath, time to breastfeed. Wait, hold up. I got to finish this fight with them guys down the street first. And it's like Goliath, he was always fighting. He grew up fighting. And David, you young, but Goliath, he's a man of war from his youth. I don't know how big Goliath was when he was born, when he was at birth, but it said he was a man of war from his youth. Now, he'd been fighting with folks since he was a little bitty boy. So they warned David about fighting Goliath. Goliath had experience fighting, but David recalled a time in verse 34, a time when there was a lion and a bear that came to take out a lamb out of the flock. And he said, I went after them and I killed that lion and that bear. And David said in verse 37, moreover, Yahuwah that delivered me out of the paw of the lion and out of the paw of the bear, he will deliver me out of the hand of this Philistine. And Saul said unto David, go, and Yahuwah be with you. David said, King Saul, Yahuwah deliver me from the lion and from the bear, and he gonna deliver me from the Philistine. And King Saul, the biggest, the tallest, the guy head and shoulders above everybody else, he said, David, just one simple word, highlight that for me, go. Then he said, and Yahuwah be with you. I hope Yahuwah with you on that. So King Saul was going to let this young man, never been in battle in all his life, go out there and fight with this giant. Not just the average war, not just the average battle, but he's going to let this young man go out there and fight with the biggest, giantest enemy that they ever had. Next, Saul armed David with his armor, and he put his helmet of brass on his head, and he armed him with a coat of mail, the same stuff Goliath had, a helmet of brass and a coat of mail and armor. Saul took off his battle garment and gave it to David. So y'all know Saul is going to be like, man, I can't go out there and fight. David got my stuff. We ain't had enough shoulder pads for everybody, so I let him use my stuff. And so I can't go fight. David's got him. Saul had no intention of fighting, is what I'm trying to say. He said in his mind, I might as well take these off and let this dude have it, because I'm not going out there and I'm not going to go fight. I'm not going to fight. And so David tried to put all those on and everything, but he finally come to his senses. And David said to Saul in verse 39, I cannot go with these, for I have not proved them. And David put them on. Saul reminded me of that time King Ahab was telling Jehoshaphat to go dress like the king, while Ahab himself was going to wear regular army clothes. And here was Saul was trying to give David the armor. Maybe everybody look at, man, that's Saul's armor. Saul beat Goliath. Y'all, Saul did it. It looked shorter than Saul, but he did it. Oh man, they killed Saul, and Saul he just appeared. No, guys, I'm still here. I'm still here. He ain't killing me like that. I don't know what Saul's intention was, but it sure was not trying to fight with Goliath. But it said at the end of that, David put them off him, because David said, I don't fight with that kind of stuff. I can't wear that. And so in verse 40, it said that David took his staff in his hand and chose him 5 smooth stones out of the brook. And he put them in the shepherd's bag, which he had, even a scrip. And his sling was in his hand, and he drew near to the Philistines. So David took 5 smooth stones. Anybody know what the 5 smooth stones represent? Somebody put that in the chat. David took 5 smooth stones. He went over there and him and Goliath started exchanging words. Next thing you know, verse 43, at the end of that the Philistine cursed David by his deities. In verse 42, Goliath was upset that they would send a young man and not a man of war. And so he started cursing David by his deities, and David stepped up for the challenge. In verse 45, then David said to the Philistine, "You come to me with a sword and with a spear and with a shield, but I come to thee in the name of Yahuwah of hosts, the Elohim of the armies of Israel, whom you have defiled. This day will Yahuwah deliver you into my hand, and I will smite you and take your head from you, and I will give the carcasses of the host of the Philistines this day unto the fowls of the air and to the wild beasts of the earth, that all the earth may know that there is an Elohim in Israel." Question: is there Elohim in Israel? Somebody let me know that in the chat. Somebody just let me know. Is there Elohim in Israel? So David was prophesying to Goliath. He said, "Man, I'm not only gonna kill you, I'm gonna cut your head off." And he said, "All your buddies, the birds gonna be eating them, and everybody gonna know that there is an Elohim in Israel because you over here putting down the armies of the Most High." And in verse 47, "And all this assembly shall know that Yahuwah saveth not with sword and spear, for the battle is Yahuwah's, and he will give you into our hands." David said, this is not a physical battle. This is a spiritual battle. The battle that you don't realize you're fighting in the physical, but you got to know how to fight in the spirit, because the weapons of our warfare are not carnal. But Goliath didn't know that. Ended up, Goliath approached David. David approached Goliath. Verse 49, David put his hand in the bag and took thence a stone and slang it and smote the Philistine in his forehead. And that stone sunk into his forehead and he fell upon his face to the earth. Now, how many stones did David have in his bag? Somebody put that in the chat for me. That's right. And how many stones did he knock Goliath out with? That's right. That's right. All you need is one book of Torah to shut down the enemies. Just one book will shut it all down. Just one precept will shut it down out of one book. But what did it say in chapter 17, verse 5? It said that he had a helmet of brass upon his head. Go back to verse 49. It said David took one stone out of that bag and smote the Philistine in his forehead, that the stone sunk into his forehead. Goliath had head protection. Remember, King Saul was trying to give David his helmet too. They always had helmet. Goliath had his helmet, but some kind of way that one smooth stone got through and busted Goliath in the head. I'm not going to touch that one, but the Most High YAH did that. I don't know what happened to Goliath, if he didn't have his helmet on, he took it off some kind of way or something, but that stone sunk into his forehead. And last I read, Goliath had a helmet on. So all praise to Almighty YAH. Verse 50. So David prevailed over the Philistine with a sling and with one stone, and smote the Philistine and slew him. But there was no sword in the hand of David. Oh, that's the problem. David had no sword. No sword. Therefore, David ran and stood upon the Philistine and took his sword and drew it out of the sheath thereof and slew him and cut off his head therewith. And the Philistines saw that champion was dead and they fled. David killed Goliath with Goliath's own sword. He took his gun and shot him with his own gun. He took his stick and beat him with his own stick. He did exactly what he said he was going to do to Goliath. And he shut Goliath's big mouth up. He took Goliath's sword and cut Goliath's head off with his own weapon. That's a bad man right there. That's a bad man. And when all the men of Israel saw that, guess what they did? In verse 52, and all the men of Israel and Judah arose and shouted and pursued the Philistines. Man, now is my time. I'm going to put my camera down now. I don't need to film this. I'm going out there. I'm going to be victorious. I'm going to get some of these medals. I'm going to get some of the spoil and everything. In the verse 53, it said they spoiled the tents of the Philistines. And then verse 54, David took the head of the Philistines and brought it to Jerusalem, but he put his armor in his tent. So when Saul saw it, Saul was like, man, who is this young man? Abner, Saul's captain of his armies, was like, man, that's Jesse's son, David. In chapter 18, verse 5. So Saul went and got him and put him in the armor, which was the natural thing to do. And David went out whatsoever Saul sent him and behaved himself wisely. And Saul set him over the men of war, and he was accepted in the sight of all the people and also in the sight of Saul's servant. Everybody knew, man, that's David. That's the guy that killed that giant. Oh, that's David, man. That dude, he's something else, man. He took our shame off of us because we all was scared. He made us the champions. We beat that big dude. We beat him, but David did it. But one day it came to pass as they came when David was returned from the slaughter of the Philistines, that the women came out of all cities of Israel singing and dancing to meet King Saul with tabrets, with joy, and with instruments of music. Now, it came to pass when David was returned. It came to pass when David came back from fighting. David came back from fighting, but the women came singing and dancing to meet King Saul. King Saul, David was fighting, but King Saul ended up in the parade some kind of way. King Saul was that dude on the team where his uniform was the cleanest. Everybody else had mud and stuff on them from fighting the battle and blood, guts, and gore on him. King Saul, he was at the front of the parade, and women came out singing and dancing to meet King Saul with instruments of music, all of that. Verse 7, and the women answered one another as they played and said, Saul had slain his 1,000 and David his 10,000. The women were singing, Saul had slain his 1,000 and David his 10,000. I bet you that was a song that they probably had a beat to that. Man, if I could have heard that back in the day. But that song infuriated King Saul. In verse 8, it says, Saul was very wroth, and the saying displeased him. And he said, they have ascribed unto David 10,000s, and to me they have ascribed but thousands. And what can he have more but the kingdom? Saul was getting hot. Man, that dude gonna take my kingdom, because the king's supposed to go to war. The king's supposed to lead the army in battle, but I'm just sitting around here with all these medals on my chest that I got for doing nothing. Basket weaving, and this one here was for crochet, and that one here, that's when I swept the floor that day. Saul wasn't out there fighting with the army. David was doing all the work. Saul shows up and he wants to be in the parade and feel that glory. Saul got upset and he's, man, David's gonna take this kingdom from me if I don't watch this dude. In verse 9, and Saul eyed David from that day forward. Saul began to check him out. Verse 10, and it came to pass on the morrow that the evil spirit from Elohim came upon Saul, and he prophesied in the midst of the house. And David played with his hand as at other times, and there was a javelin in Saul's hand, and Saul cast the javelin, for he said, I will smite David even to the wall with it. And David avoided out of his presence twice. Saul's evil spirit. Where did that evil spirit come from? Somebody put that in the chat for me. That's right. That evil spirit came from Elohim, from Almighty YAH, on King Saul. What that remind you of? 1 King 22. Remember that thing we went over with Ahab? when Micaiah told him, hey man, don't go fighting and all. In 1 Kings 22:19, and Micaiah said, I saw Yahuwah sitting on his throne, and all the hosts of heaven standing by him on his right hand and on his left. And Yahuwah said, who shall persuade Saul, Ahab, that he may go up and fall at Ramoth Gilead? And one said on this man, another on that. And there came forth a spirit and stood before Yahuwah and said, I will persuade him. And Yahuwah said unto him, wherewith? What you working with? And he said, I will go forth and be a lion spirit in the mouth of all his prophets. And he said, you shall persuade him and prevail also. Go forth and do. Yahuwah said to that spirit, that lion spirit, go ahead. You're going to persuade King Ahab to go over there and get himself killed. Go ahead, do that. You will prevail. And Yahoo told him in verse 20, now, therefore, whether you believe it or not, whether you trust this prophet or not, he said, behold, Yahuwah had put a lion spirit in the mouth of all these prophets, and Yahuwah had spoken evil things concerning you. And I'm going to tell you, that meeting they had for King Ahab like that some years later after King Saul, that same kind of meeting went on in the Shamayim in heaven about King Saul. Before Yahuwah sent that evil spirit, that meeting took place in the Shamayim. I don't know if there's a prophet to see the host of heaven standing on his right hand and his left, and him asking who gonna persuade King Saul, who gonna trip him up so that he fall, because he got to go. He not about Yah's business. He not about keeping Torah. He gotta go. I got David. He's up and coming. In 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, verse 10 through 12, today, Almighty YAH done had a meeting about some folks that don't want to keep his word. Almighty YAH done had a meeting about some folks that's just playing with the book, that still got your idols all over your house, still passing out your candy on trick or treat, Halloween, and all this other foolishness, still waiting for New Year's Eve so you could do your black eyed peas and your cabbage and stuff like that, and all that foolishness that they do for prosperity, still giving out their little heart candies for Valentine's Day and all of that foolishness, still messing with the worldly pagan holidays, and don't want to keep near one feast day that's written in the book. But in 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, verse 10 through 12, it says in verse 11 that Elohim shall send them a strong delusion that they would believe a lie, and that they all might be damned who believe not the truth. In verse 11, who's sending them the strong delusion? Somebody put it in the chat. Who is sending them the strong delusion in this day, in this time? That meeting is going on in the Shamayim about somebody, because the Most High YAH is tired of their foolishness. It's time to pass under the rod. It's going to be some rod passing happening. And those that don't want to get in Torah, he gave you the chance. He woke you up to the truth. He gave the chance. But now he's going to start weeding the tares from the wheat. That's what's going to happen. 1 Samuel 16, verse 15, it said King Saul had an evil spirit from where? From Elohim, from Almighty YAH. Chapter 18, verse 10, the evil spirit from Elohim came upon Saul. In verse 11, Saul cast a javelin, for he said, I will smite David even unto the wall. And David had to dodge that javelin twice. He like, man, what's that dude doing? I'm on your team. Why you treat me like this? Verse 12, and Saul was afraid of David because Yahuwah was with him and was departed from Saul. Yahuwah was departed from Saul, but Yahuwah was with David. Guess what spirit King Saul was working with? Somebody put it in the chat. The evil spirit. That's right. All right, that's right. 2 Timothy 1:7. For Elohim had not given us the spirit of fear, but of power and of love and of a sound mind. Guess what spirit Saul had? Anybody? Anybody got an idea? What spirit stepped up in that meeting in the Shamayim and said, look, I can take care of this. I can get that dude. I can get him. I can trip him up. Go back to 1 Samuel 18:12. What spirit was he working with? In verse 12, it said, and Saul was afraid of David. What spirit was that? Somebody put that in the chat. Elohim had not given us the spirit of fear, but of power and of love and of a sound mind. Saul was losing his mind because he had the spirit of fear. The spirit of fear jumped up in that meeting in the Shamayim and said, look, man, I got this. And Yahuwah said, go for it. You're going to prevail. Go ahead. And now Saul was afraid of David because Yahuwah was with David. If Yahuwah with David, David's going to love his brother. So why are you afraid of that man? How we know what spirit King Saul was working with? It wasn't that lying spirit in 1 Kings 22, or that jealous spirit in Numbers chapter 5, verse 14, or that hateful spirit in James chapter 4, verse 5. It wasn't none of them spirits, but it was that spirit of fear. For Elohim had not given us the spirit of fear, but of power and of love and of a sound mind. 1 Samuel verse 10. It said, it came to pass on the morrow that the evil spirit from Elohim came upon Saul, and David was doing what? And David played with his hand as at other times. As at other times. David was playing music. And what happened to the evil spirit before when David played? Somebody put that in the chat. What would happen to that spirit when David would play before? Man, we got some scholars in the room today. Look at that, man. That's right. That spirit got to stepping. That spirit hit the road, and don't you come back. Look, that spirit got to stepping, but this time, David was playing just like he always played. He was doing that thing. He was playing on that harp. He was hitting that thing. And man, doing the best songs, singing his best tune. And this time, there was a javelin in Saul's hand. And Saul, according to verse 11, threw that javelin at David. Question, do y'all think that spirit left Saul? Saul threw a javelin at him. Do y'all think that spirit had left when David started playing? Just a Y for yes and for no. I'm just curious. No, not this time. Not this time. That showed me that the spirit of fear is not influenced by music. The spirit of fear is not influenced by music. David was playing just like he always played. But in the spiritual realm, for those who understand and where I'm talking now, because I'm talking some spiritual stuff, and somebody might still be on the earthly plane. But that spirit of fear is not reacting to music like that. So was that spirit of fear the same spirit that Saul initially had? Because that spirit that Saul initially had, that thing used to leave when the music was playing, right? Y'all think that was the same spirit that Saul had at first? Put a Y for yes and for no. I'm just talking, man. Y'all know me. I just be talking like that. That had to be another spirit. That had to be, oh, 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 Matthew 12:43. Matthew 12:43. That's what it had to be. It says, when the unclean spirit is gone out of a man, he walketh through dry places seeking rest and find none. You see, when the spirit of Yah entered into Saul, when Saul was anointed as king, Samuel said to King Saul, look, the spirit of Yahuwah will come upon you, and you shall prophesy with them, and shall be turned into another man. You're not going to be yourself no more. You're going to be another man, because the spirit of Almighty Yahuwah going to be on you. It's coming on you. Giving it Matthew 12:43. Let's go on back. Anybody see that Saul was given another spirit? Anybody? Just put me a YFS info in the chat. Just let me know if you're rolling with me. All right. So when the unclean spirit is going out of man, he walked through dry places seeking rest and finding. When the spirit of Yahuwah came upon Saul in 1 Samuel 10:6, that unclean spirit had to go. That was the spirit that Saul was working with before the spirit of Yahuwah came upon him. And that spirit left when Yahuwah's spirit came. Saul's unclean spirit was removed from the temple of the Ruach HaKodesh, which is his body. And so when Yahuwah's spirit comes, our unclean spirit or spirits get to stepping from this earthen vessel. Go check out 1 Corinthians 3:16, 17, and 1 Corinthians 6:19. It tells you that your body is the temple of the Ruach HaKodesh. So that spirit that Saul had to go when Yah's spirit came, when he was anointed. But that spirit left. Verse 44, then that spirit, he said, I will return into my house from which I came out. And when he is come, he findeth it empty, swept, and gone. He come and he find it clean because Ruach HaKodesh been there. And Ruach HaKodesh been in the temple, making this thing a temple of the Ruach, cleaning out all things that bring spot, wrinkle, and any such blemish. And that evil Ruach, he come back and he find it empty, swept, and garnished. And why he's coming back? Because he realized Yah's spirit ain't there no more. So that unclean spirit, that evil spirit come back. And he find that place clean because the Ruach HaKodesh been there doing a mighty work on King Saul. Saul was left better off than what he was found by the Ruach HaKodesh. But when Yah's spirit removed from him, boom, evil spirit come back on him. Same thing he was working with before. But not only that, verse 45, then goeth he and take with himself 7 other spirits, more wicked than himself, badder than he was. And they enter in and dwell there. And the last state of that man is worse than the first. Even so shall it be also unto this wicked generation. King Saul's prior unclean spirit returned. And as a result of the Ruach HaKodesh leaving, he didn't want to keep the book no more. He didn't want to follow Almighty YAH anymore. So that unclean spirit, that evil spirit returned, and he brought back 7 more for a total of 8. And that's why you find when somebody stopped living for Almighty YAH, when they truly stop, even if they in them churches, when they stop living, when they stop drawing closer to Almighty YAH, when they stop trying to please him with their praises, when they stop trying to pray and study and fast and seek the Most High, you start seeing they go back in the world and they hit it hard. Am I making sense to anybody? Anybody understand what I'm saying? Anybody know what I'm talking about? Is this true? Total coach. This when people leave the assembly, they fall hard, and it seems like they were worse than they ever was, because a plethora of ruachs is trying to jump on in there, where the Ruach HaKodesh had clean. 1 Samuel 18:12, Saul was said to be afraid of David because Yahuwah was with him. And now Saul walking around with the spirit of fear as one of them things. And that spirit of fear does not react to music like that evil spirit did. I don't have time to go through Saul's whole life, but you're going to see he went into necromancy. By the time of his end of his life, he was into witchcraft and was working with all kinds of things. Envy, with jealousy, with hatred, the spirit of fear, all of those spirits he had. But Saul was afraid of David. Why was Saul afraid of David? Saul was fearful of David because he saw David's light. Yeah, that's right. That's right. Because Yah was with him. And when Yah is with you, you have light. Where that said? 1 John 1:5. Yeah. Highlight that for him. I'm not going to read it. Elohim is light. And when Elohim is with you, you the light of the world. They're going to see you shining. They're going to see your light. And as a result of seeing your light, some people are going to get upset that they're in darkness and they're going to start treating you wrong like King Saul was trying to treat David. And as a result, King Saul, he's, man, I got to kill David some kind of way. He made David a captain over his thousands, it said in verse 13. But David always keeping himself straight. It said in verse 14, David behaved himself wisely in all his ways, and Yahuwah was with him. Deuteronomy 4:6 tells us that Torah is our wisdom and understanding. So if David's behaving himself wisely, it's because he was working with Torah. And so Saul in verse 15 saw David behaving himself wisely. And guess what? Highlight, he was afraid of him. The spirit of fear still working with him, still working with him. But everybody in Israel, it tells us in the next verse, they loved David because he went in and out before him. He was the one going to fight the battles. Saul said, you know what? I'm going to give him one of my daughters here. He tried to give him the oldest daughter first, and then he reneged on his word. He took that girl and he gave it to somebody else and everything. In 1 Samuel 18:19, it said he gave it to Adriel, the Maholatite, to wife. But then Saul, you know what? I could trip David up, tell him, hey, man, if you go get me 100 Philistine foreskins, then you could have my other daughter, Michal. And in verse 25, they told David, like Saul said, man, the king don't want no money or nothing like that. He know you're a poor shepherd boy. But he said, just bring me 100 foreskins, 100 foreskins of the Philistine. He just want 100 Philistine foreskins, but the Philistine, they the enemy. So David got to go over there and he got to kill 100 of them to get Saul's daughter, Michal, in marriage. So what does David do? In verse 27, David arose and went, he and his men, and slew of the Philistines 200 men, and David brought their foreskins and gave them in full tale to the king. You want 100? Here's 200. Bam, bam. And Saul gave him his daughter to wife, thinking his daughter was going to mess David up because he knew his daughter wasn't straight, which that's another story for another day. And so Saul's little plan fails. Verse 28, and that Michal, Saul's daughter, loved David. So it's like Michal not messing him up. Verse 29, and Saul was yet the more afraid of David. That spirit of fear was still working with King Saul. Chapter 19, on 2 occasions, this is one, David and Jonathan, Saul's son, had a talk and said, look, Jonathan, you and I are friends, but your daddy trying to kill me. And Jonathan said, oh, man, it ain't like that. Well, I'm going to go talk with him. And so in 1 Samuel 19:4, Jonathan goes, speaks to his daddy about David, and he said unto him, let not the king sin against his servant, against David, because he had not sinned against you, and because his works have been to thee very good. He's fighting all your battles for you. Why are you doing this to him? It's sin. What you trying to do to that brother? In verse 6, Saul hearkened unto the voice of Jonathan, and Saul sware, as Yahuwah liveth, he shall not be slain. He made a vow to Yahuwah. Saul said, I'm vowing to Yahuwah, I'm not going to kill David. Verse 7, Jonathan called David and told David all those things, and Jonathan brought David to Saul, and David was in Saul's presence as in times past. So David came back, everything was good, everything was lovely and wonderful, but one problem. Verse 8, and there was war again. There was war again. And David went out and fought the Philistines and slew them in great slaughter, and they fled from him. And I'm sure when David came back, the women were singing, they were singing, David killed 100 million thousands, and Saul killed 1,000. In verse 9, And the evil spirit from Yahuwah was upon Saul as he sat in his house with his javelin in his hand. And David played with his hand. David playing music again. It should have calmed Saul down. And Saul sought to smite David even to the wall with the javelin, but David slipped away out of Saul's presence, and he smote the javelin into the wall, and David fled and escaped that night. David escaped third time. David escaped from Saul's javelin. Third time. Saul made this vow to Yahuwah, I'm not going to kill David. In Numbers 30, verse 2, you can go check it out. It said, when you make a vow to Yahuwah, he expects you to keep your vow and not to be going back on your word. If a man vow unto Yahuwah or swear an oath to bind his soul with a bond, he shall not break his word. He shall do according to all that proceed out of his mouth. King Saul made a vow. I'm not going to kill David. And next thing, he's throwing javelins at him again. So David ran out of there, as we all would. We all would have got the step in 1 Samuel 19:11. Saul also sent messengers to David's house to watch him and to slay him in the morning. And Michal, David's wife, told him, saying, if you save not your life tonight, tomorrow you shall be slain. She said, David, if you don't get out of here now, you ain't gonna make it to see tomorrow. And so Michal let David down through a window, and he went and fled and escaped. And Michal took an image. She took an idol and laid it in the bed. I wonder if coming out of her daddy's house, because children get something from somewhere. They don't just pop up with idols themselves, but she got an idol from somewhere. I'm just saying Saul had an evil spirit and stuff like that. I'm just putting two and two together. And maybe Saul had idols. Maybe he was an idolater. But that's another story for another day. She took an idol and she put it in the bed, put some gold hair and stuff on it, and pretend that was David. In verse 14, and when Saul sent messengers, Kyle said, he's sick. He can't come out there with y'all. He's sick. He's sick. Saul messengers went back and said, Saul, he's sick. We couldn't go. They wouldn't let us in. He said, bring him up here in his bed. That I'm going to kill him. And there he is again, breaking his vow. He forgot his vow again, that he would not kill David. So David fled and escaped according to 1 Samuel 19:18. And David ran to Samuel the prophet. I don't know who else I could run to. Let me go to Samuel the prophet for help. And he went to Ramah and talked with Samuel, verse 19. And it was told Saul, hey, David's over there in Ramah with Samuel. And so King Saul starts sending messengers 3 times. Every time he sent them, those start prophesying. And King Saul, he comes up himself. And Yahuwah's Ruach hit him in 1924. It tells us that King Saul stripped off his clothes also and prophesied before Samuel in like manner and laid down naked all that day and all that night, where they say is Saul among the prophets. Saul stripped buck naked and was prophesying all day and all night. I don't know what Saul was working with like that, but this time it said the rock of Elohim came on him, and them things that was in him, they had no choice but to bow down before Almighty YAH's presence, and they was prophesying about how good the Most High is, but they convinced King Saul to take all them clothes off first. In chapter 20, there was a new moon feast, and David and Jonathan got together, and David said, look, man, your dad's always trying to kill me. Jonathan said, look, I'm going to try and talk to him one more time at the new moon feast. And so they came up with this plan. Y'all know the story. Y'all probably read 1 Samuel 20 100 times already. If you didn't, go read it. Don't neglect the book. But David and Jonathan made this plan. If I come out there and I shoot some arrows and it don't reach you, you can come on. But if the arrows goes beyond you, then you got to get out of here. My dad is going to kill you. And David and Jonathan made a covenant with each other about their children in the future. Jonathan went to the new moon feast in 1 Samuel 20:28. King Saul asked, where's David? Because I got this javelin here. You know me, I'm going to do my thing. When that spirit hit me, I'm going to hit David. Jonathan answered Saul, David earnestly asked leave of me to go to Bethlehem. In verse 29, he said, our family had a sacrifice in the city. And so he asked, pray that you let me go with my brethren and not be here at the king's table. And when King Saul heard that David wasn't coming, because he had it all planned, he's like, all right, Pookie, you stand over there. Ray, you over that June bug, you in that corner. And when he comes sitting right here next to me, y'all know what to do. Y'all, when I get that signal, when I get that signal, y'all come on, do that thing. And he had all his plan laid out. And Jonathan, his son, just told him, David ain't coming. He ain't coming to that. He's not going to show up. 1 Samuel 20:33, Saul cast a javelin at Jonathan to smite him, at his own son, whereby Jonathan knew that it was determined of his father to kill David. Jonathan finally figured out that his daddy wanted to kill David. When his daddy got mad with him, he told him stuff about his mom and all kinds of stuff. King Saul just went off. Go read that. So what does David do? David's, yeah, Jonathan, I told you, I gotta leave. I gotta leave. Chapter 21. David runs to the priest. Verse 2, and David said unto Ahimelech the priest, the king had commanded me a business, and had said unto me, let no man know anything of the business whereby I send thee, and what I have commanded thee, and I have appointed my servants to such and such a place. So David basically said, look, I'm on a secret mission for King Saul. I can't tell you about it. I can't tell you. I'm telling you too much right now, but I know I could trust you. I could trust you, but I'm on a secret mission for King Saul. And I'm just letting you know, if you see something funny, I'm moving funny, is because it's G14 classified, 007, I'm incognito. So David started asking, look, I'm hungry. You got any food? In verse 4, the priest answered David and said, there is no common bread under my hand, but there is hallowed or set apart bread, if the young men have kept themselves at least from women. So we got the show bread, but it's set apart. You can't have that, but I could give it to you if y'all hadn't been with women in a while. Verse 5, and David answered the priest and said unto him, of a truth, women have been kept from us about these 3 days, since I came out, and the vessels of the young men are holy or set apart, Kodesh, and the bread is in a manner common, yeah, though it were sanctified this day in a vessel. So they talk to priests because they're starving now, and he say, yeah, we haven't been with women, and the vessels all holy and everything, but it's in a manner common. David basically was saying, today the bread is in the vessel, but you got to throw that out today. Let's look at 1 Chronicles 9:32. This is about the showbread. It says, and other of their brethren, the sons of the Kohathites, were over the showbread to prepare it every Sabbath. The Kohathites prepared the bread every Shabbat. What day did the Kohathites prepare new showbread? That's right, Aki. It was on Shabbat day. David knew that they was taking the old bread out and they were going to throw it away and put the new bread. Wink, wink to the calendar, folks. 1 Samuel 21:5. So David convinced them to give them the bread. They ate the bread. In verse 7, Doeg, the Edomite, was there, and he was the chief of the herdmen that belonged to Saul, it tells us. And he saw this whole thing. He went and told Saul, and unfortunately, King Saul went over there and killed all them priests for helping David, and they didn't even have any clue, because David wasn't exactly being totally honest with them when he said he was G14 classified and he was 007 incognito. And those priests died as a result, probably 80, 90 something priests or more. What happened next? David asked the priest, do you have any weapons? And in verse 9, the priest said, the sword of Goliath, the Philistine, who you slew in the valley of Elah, behold, it is here, wrapped in a cloth behind the ephod. If you will take that, take it, for there is no other save that here. And David said, there's none like that. Give it me. So here it is in David's lowest time of his life. He's running for his life from the king. He's begging for food. He's trying to be deceptive with the priest so he can get some bread. Here it is, the Most High produces the sword of Goliath to remind him, wasn't I with you that day? Wasn't I with you? And David said, yeah, give it to me. And he's not even thinking, Yahuwah was with me. And I know he got to be with me now. He anointed me through the prophet Samuel. Next thing you know, in verse 10, And David arose and fled that day for fear of Saul. Now David's scared of Saul and went to Achish, king of Gath. Achish. Ak. What does Ak mean? All right. Ak means brother. What does Ish mean? That's right. That's right. What does Achish mean? That's right. It means brother man. It means brother man. David ran and went to Achish, king of Gath. But there was one problem. Achish was a Philistine, their enemy. David didn't feel safe with his own people. He felt more safe with the enemies than he did with his own kinfolks. We got to learn to love one another. We got to learn how to work through the differences and to love one another as the Most High desires for us to do. So David flees to Achish, to Broman, and to the Philistines, their enemies. Next in verse 11, and the servants of Achish said unto him, is this not David, the king of the land? They call him king of the land because the kings always led the battle, and they never saw Saul out there, so David was the king. In their mind, it's like, isn't this the king? And they said, did they not sing one to another of him in dances, saying, Saul had slain his 1,000 and David his 10,000? Didn't they say he killed more of us than King Saul? He coming to us? He coming to us by himself without no army like that? And the women were saying, he killed our champion. In fact, David standing right there with Goliath's sword in his hand, and they talking about, man, wasn't this the dude that killed tens of thousands of us? Wasn't this the dude that killed our champion Goliath? Verse 12, it says, David laid up these words in his heart and was so afraid of Achish, man, the king of Gath. And David changed his behavior before them. Highlight, he changed his behavior. Highlight that. Do y'all know that the title of this message today is change of behavior? The title of this message is change of behavior. What David did is change his behavior before them and feigned himself mad in their hands, and scrabbled on the doors of the gate, and let his spittle fall down upon his beard. Then said Achish unto his servants, lo, you see the man is mad. Highlight mad. He's insane. There it is up in the blue box in the top right. H7696, Shagar. It means to rave through insanity. Achish, man, said to the servant, lo, you see the man is mad. Wherefore then have you brought him to me? Why you brought him to me? They captured him and brought him to Achish. Man, why you brought this dude to me? Just spitting all up in his beard and scratching on my door and stuff like that. And they looked at David and thought he was insane. Thought he was insane. Verse 15. Achish said, have I need of madmen? Highlight mad. That you have brought this fellow to play the mad man in my presence? What does that mad mean? That mad is shagar, to rave through insanity. David just went ballistic. He went crazy on him. He went insane. And he said again that you have brought this fellow to play the mad man. Highlight mad over there again. Anybody know what David was doing? Somebody put it in the chat. David was playing what? What kind of man he was playing in front of them? All right. He was playing a madman. And when they looked at David, it said, have I need of madmen that you have brought this fellow to play the madman in my presence? Shall this fellow come into my house? He's like, man, y'all gonna bring this dude to my place, to my house? And that word mad is shagar. And in verse 15, Achish said of David that David was shagar or insane twice. In verse 14, it says that David was shagar or insane one time. Highlight that for him. But guess what? When David changed his behavior, highlight change his behavior for me in verse 13. Somebody put a COB in the chat for me, because we're talking about changing our behavior. When David changed his behavior before them, he feigned himself mad. He made himself like he was mad. But let's see, mad right there in verse 13. It means halal. Anybody know what halal means? Put it in the chat. Anybody know what halal means in Hebrew? The English translation? Put that in the chat. Let me see who my scholars are today. That's right. They thought David was shagar or insane. But guess what David was doing? David went back to that time when he was a little shepherd boy, just making up songs in the pasture with the sheep. He went back to that time when he was just praising the Most High by himself. He had a prayer closet moment when he was at the door of his enemies, when his enemies was coming against him like a flood, when he had nobody else to run to in his own kinfolks, his own nation, that he had to go run to the enemy, the Philistine. David was not shagar, but he was halal. He wasn't mad as in insane, but he was halal as in praising the Most High YAH. He said, you know what? These fellas here, they try and kill me. They're going to try and kill me. I'm in the hands of the enemy. But if I got to die today, I'm going down praising the Most High YAH. I am going down giving esteem to his great name. I'm going to boast about his mighty works. I'm going to celebrate the Most High YAH with my last words and my last breath. David changed his behavior. He had a change of behavior. He conquered his fear by praising the Most High, and it gave him boldness to praise. He was not afraid, nor was he ashamed to praise, but he began to praise. I could see David out there right now just dancing with all his might. I could see them looking at him. That guy's insane. Look at him. Spit just coming down his beard. He's scratching on the door and stuff. And this guy's acting a fool. He's insane. But isn't the praise of the Most High's people always seen as insanity to those in the world who don't know what we're working with? Isn't that true? How the world always think what we do is insane. But David's, man, I'm going to praise him. I don't care who watching. I don't care if I'm going to die. I'm going to die praising. I don't know what David was saying, but and David probably was saying Psalm 27 says, Yahuwah is my light, my salvation. Whom shall I fear? Yahuwah is the strength of my life. Whom shall I be afraid? He was probably praising the Most High. And he went back to that time before he could fight with man's weapons, before he knew how to work a sword, before he took Goliath's head off. He went back to that time when he knew how to fight with the weapons of Yah's warfare, which are not carnal. The weapons that you get when you learn how to fight, not with your fist or with your sword or with your gun or with your knife or with your stick, but when you learn how to fight on your knees and on your face with your hands lifted up and your eyes looking to the Shamayim, from whence our help coming from. That's what David was working with. But what did David really say? Let's go to Psalm 34. Let's check out what David really said. Psalm 34. You can also check out Psalm 56. It talks about this time in David's life. But in Psalm 34, it says, a psalm of David, when he changed his behavior before Abimelech. Now, I know they was calling him Achish back there, bro, man, but Abimelech is my father, the king, and so that was his title also. But this is when David changed his behavior before Achish or Abimelech, who drove him away and he departed. He said, I will bless Yahuwah at all times. His praise shall continually be in my mouth. That's what David was saying when all of that spittle was falling down his beard, when he was scratching on that door. I'm going to praise Yahuwah at all times. His praise shall continually be in my mouth. He said, my soul shall make her boast in Yahuwah. The humble shall hear thereof and be glad. Oh, magnify Yahuwah with me. Let us exalt his name together. Man, I know y'all my enemy, but y'all got to praise the Most High YAH. Y'all got to exalt him with me because he is good. I got Goliath's sword on my side. I don't need it. All I need is uplifted hands. And he said in verse 4, I sought Yahuwah and he heard me and delivered me from all my fears. They looked unto him and were lighted. Those who look to Yahuwah is like they begin to shine. They have this light that the world can't explain. And their faces were not ashamed because we're not ashamed. The gospel, the good news of the good word, the good message. We're not ashamed. They looked unto him and were lighted, and their faces were not ashamed. David began to shine in the face of the enemy. And he said, verse 6, this poor man cried, and Yahuwah heard him and saved him out of his trouble. He was thanking Almighty Yahuwah, and he wasn't out of the enemy's hands yet. And he said, verse 7, and the angel of Yahuwah encamped around about them that fear him and deliver them. Oh, taste and see that Yahuwah is good. Blessed is the man that trusts in him. We got to trust Yah. And when our enemies come at us like a flood, do not resort to going back to the old ways that you used to have. Don't resort to that, but just begin to have a change of behavior. A change of behavior. When the whole world think that you insane because you turning the other cheek. When the whole world think that you insane. When you saying, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. When the whole world think you insane. Allow yourself to have that change of behavior and to give him the praise and the esteem that is due his great and his Kodesh name. David was not insane. David was a man after Abba Yah's own heart. David really sought to please Almighty Yah. The end result was that King Saul ended up dying by enemies, and David became king because he knew how to fight, not just in the physical, but he knew how to fight in the spiritual. He knew how to please Almighty Yah, and he knew that if he could just praise and please Almighty Yah, Almighty Yah would fight his battles for him. He would take his enemies down for him. The people that was around him, they chose the tall guy who was head and shoulders above him. David was not the obvious choice of the people, but he was the obvious choice of Almighty Yah. And when times got hard for David, and David realized, I'm an adult now, things are not as easy as when I was a little boy. And man, I'm going through some things sometimes. I got this dude Saul after me trying to kill me. My wife, Makal, she got them idols in the house. I don't know what to turn or who to turn to next. I don't have no kin folks I can run to. I got to run to my enemies for help. David did not quit. He did not give up. He didn't begin to follow the world instead of Torah, but David began to halal, halal, halal. David began to praise. When he had nothing else to fall back on, he went back to the thing that made Yah chose him from the beginning. The reason why Almighty Yah sent Samuel the prophet to anoint him, because he was a worshiper and he knew how to halal. He knew how to praise. And we have to learn from David. When we get upset on the job, we have to learn from David. When the love of your life get on your last nerve, we got to learn from David. One day, when they send that FEMA bus down the street, we're going to have to learn from David and learn how to halal. We're going to have to change our behavior and learn how to praise. One day, when they try and give us that mark and that prophecy gets fulfilled, we're going to have to learn to halal. And we're going to have to learn how to praise Almighty Yah. Is anybody out there that would say, I have decided to follow Yahushua HaMashiach and I'm not turning back? There is no turning back, because when tough times on me, I'm not going to have a slip of the tongue. I'm not going to get upset and start wanting to fight with folks and stuff like that, but I'm going to be the person that he says that I am, that he's calling me to be. He called those things that were not as though they were. So life has a lot of ups and downs. Life has a lot of highs and lows, but the way that you deal with those low times, that shows exactly who you are. If you go to cussing and cutting up and wanting to fight with folks, when your low time hit, shame on you. You ain't spent enough time in prayer. You have not spent enough time with praise. You have not fasted enough. And the people gonna see it. People gonna see it eventually if you don't get to it, you don't hop to it. You're not gonna go insane like the rest of the world. Everybody, hey, that's the easy road. But you're gonna go ahead and halal. You're gonna say, you know what? It ain't good right now, but I'm gonna just praise. I'm gonna just praise. I'm gonna just praise. I'm gonna just praise. But when troubled times come our way, remember this message and have a change of behavior. So all praise to the Most High YAH. I hope you enjoyed this message. I hope that the Most High YAH speaks to you through this. All praise to the Most High YAH. Let's pray.
On another plane, elevating past the tricks you playing.